Alexander Afenyo-Markin. Let's cross over.
If you look at the records, within 4 years, you've lost massively. And then you come back after 4 years to win that number of seats. Move to 2008. NDC gained back some seats from us. And then in 2012, we were further reduced. We had about 125 seats. Then 2016, we had 169 MPP. So we gained back over 40. We got 46 seats more. So within 4 years, NDC had celebrated a sweet victory, a parliamentary majority. But within 4 years, we had 46 gains. And then we had 169. Then within 4 years again, 2016 to 2020, with our 169, we came down all the way to 137. Of course, the independent joined us to make us 138, giving us a single seat majority, meaning that we again lost over 37 seats within 4 years. Then come 2024 elections. We've gone further down. I believe that with hard work, collective posture in the chamber, come 2028, we'll turn things around. Our friends in the NDC were not heartbroken when we defeated them in 2016 and when we had over 1 million votes for a presidential candidate.
Almost 1 million.
Almost. For a presidential candidate, and they were dealt with at the parliamentary level. We had overwhelming majority, which was the first in the history of our politics. They didn't give up. They went back home, did their introspection, came back stronger, and I believe that that history and our own history in 97 would guide us as we move into 2025 to put together a formidable opposition, a formidable minority, to keep the feet of our friends to the fire. I'm very optimistic that we'll get there, and I'm ready to lead that charge. We'll get there. I mean, when you are in office, there are a lot of things that would go against you. You are implementing a policy, people will be disappointed, people will be happy. There may be policies that you may not be able to implement. Power itself, how people manage themselves when there is power, and all. With time, the apathy at the grassroots, people have their own concerns, have a certain expectation that they've helped the party to come into office. They have certain expectations. So from the one that you get elected, you start losing your vote. And if you look at the trend, if you really study the outcome of the elections, first, we had 6 million Ghanaians who decided not to vote at all. If you look at the electoral roll, the register, we have 18 million plus Ghanaians in there.
Yes.
Now, the total voter turnout was around 12 million, not up to 30 million.
Exactly.
So 6 million did not vote. That's a third of Ghanaians who decided they won't vote at all. Then let's deal with those who voted. For those who voted, you realize that for MPP, 2020, what we got, and now, some 2 million plus of our votes went off. Whereas in the NDC presidential candidate, if you compare what he had this time and that of 2020, he only gained some 100,000.
Aren't we simplifying that? Because you look at the NPP, for instance, and you say, oh, 2 million didn't vote, but this number voted. Do you know for certain whether these are NPP members or these were people who may have voted for you because they probably may have liked your policies, but even voted for a different candidate? Because if you look at your parliamentary candidate votes, they had more votes than the presidential candidate. Certainly, we cannot easily conclude that these were MPP voters.
Okay, so let me go with your argument on the fact that they were not MPP voters. But it doesn't also take away the fact that some 2 million people who voted for us in 2020 election did not vote for us. Whereas in the NDC, they only had a net gain of about 100,000. Okay?
Yeah.
So that said, you can now make certain inferences. But we as a party, we are yet to set up a committee to go into the issues. So I believe that when the committee is set up and they come out with their report, we would be able to get a better understanding of the issues. And it is not going to be the first. Our friends in the NDC did it, the Kwesi report, and they studied it and they implemented the recommendations. So I'm sure we would also have an opportunity to deal with it. Now, NDC has overwhelming majority in parliament. You know, they've promised a lean government. I can foresee a lot of their MPs being redundant.
How?
So they've promised some 40 to 60 ministerial
60 ministers.
Well, so 60 ministers. Of the 60, some would have to come from parliament because of the constitutional custom. So they are going to have about 35 or maximum 40 MPs who will be ministers and deputy ministers. If you take that out of their over 170 seats, they would have about 140 MPs. That is huge. Who would be redundant in parliament, and all they would have to come and do in parliament is to do yeah. All right.
Is their job not to come to parliament?
Now,
first of all, before they become ministers?
These MPs would have demands from their constituents. I'm talking to you in practical terms. I know what I know. And they will be expected to go to their constituencies. The money will not be there because only few would have had ministerial appointments, and that is where their woes will start. We face the same problem. You remember that it got to a point where it was very difficult to get our members into the chamber, where they would tell me that Mr. Speaker was saying, "Leader, look behind you." Very soon, I would tell the majority leader that, "Look behind, though you have 170 plus, but your MPs will not be there."
Let me get the clarification here. When you say very soon, because you're looking about 40 ministers coming from parliament and there'll be demands on them, is it the case that you're suggesting by virtue of becoming a minister as a member of parliament, you get additional funds? Because we know the salaries that you're supposed to get.
Yeah.
We know what cabinet ministers get and what non-cabinet ministers get. So where is the money going to come from that they would use to do constituency work?
All right. So not personal to them, but they would have access to opportunities.
What opportunities are we talking about here?
Well, if you are a minister of state, you are a member of parliament, and government policies that allow for some social interventions, okay, you have access to them. You would be the primary source, or you would know, and you would be able to lobby directly that these projects or these resources should go to your constituency. It happens.
Because
you would definitely have an advantage over an MP who is not a minister. It's a fact. Let's not pretend about it.
You make reference to money. You would not have the money sometimes. So I
not money to you as a person. Maybe let me clarify. When I use the word money, it is not to your person, but as in resources. Let me just take the word money and away and replace it with resources. Resources for the constituency. Obviously, if you are a minister of energy, if you are a minister for natural resources, minister for local government, you are a member of parliament, you are in a better position to have resources for your constituents as compared to your colleague who is an MP without any rank in government. It's a fact. I can't pretend about it.
And talking about practicality, I mean, you say let's be practical.
Very much so.
Let's be practical. You would agree also that once you become a minister, the expectation is that you get additional funds. And many of you would agree that part of the problem, part of the procurement problem in this country is the expectation of the constituents, isn't it?
Look, we are our own enemies. We politicians, sometimes when we need the power, we forget ourselves. So you're right. We've created a certain expectation, and the people then expect that you have to deliver. For instance, yesterday night I was teasing Dr. Kesiel Atuba-Forson, the minority leader, that during the campaign, he went to the cocoa growing areas and said that MPP government would have to increase the price of producer price. Okay? So I asked him, Ato, now that you have power, are you going to increase that? Now you say this to the people. Now you have power. You are supposed to increase the price of cocoa, the producer price. Do you have what it takes to absorb the subsidy? You don't, but you've said it. You go around and you make promises. For instance, President Mahama, as a candidate, was promising a lot of social interventions. At the same time, promising that he was going to repeal taxes, nuisance taxes he calls them. Now, how do you introduce Nkukon Ketinketi policy? Nkukon Ketinketi, I understand it basically to mean that the government will roll out social intervention programs to help the private sector, the informal sector, so that somebody would have access to do poultry. Somebody will have some access to do his farm. Somebody who wants to go into a confirmed business will do it. But all these things come at a cost to the state. So if you promise these, and then you also promise that you are going to take away taxes, how would you fund the social intervention program? A social intervention program comes at a cost. Again, the private sector, here we are. For the past 3 years, our colleagues have been fighting us. Why do we give tax incentives to the private sector under 1D, 1F? To the extent that yesterday, the day before yesterday, they were even preventing me from tabling the motion for us to consider the 1D, 1F, which would otherwise give opportunity to the private sector to make savings, bring in raw materials at a cheaper cost, invest in their business, expand. This is a major relief to the private sector. They say no. They want to tax them. They should pay taxes on the machinery, on the raw material. So I see some conflicts, some inconsistencies in the NDC. However, I would want to give them a grace period. I want to see how they go about their governance.
What
the
is
first
that
100
grace
days.
period that you want to give?
Oh, for the first 100 days. The first 100 days is we should give them the opportunity to set up the government. We shouldn't be in a rush. That would be bad faith on my part. That would mean I'm being unreasonable. No, I've been in government before. I know how governance is. So I wouldn't want to rush them. All these things that my respected colleague Ablakwa is saying, they did citizens vetting committee during the revolution. It didn't get anywhere. Let him have it.
Before we go for a break.
I'm saying they set it up.
Yes, before we go for a break, quick one.
I'd like to end. Sorry,
okay,
please
go ahead.
We know somebody may have to ask Mr. Ablakwa how that committee's work will be funded. If it is a private person who is funding it, they are talking about corruption. We need to know who is funding it, whose money they are going to use to buy fuel, whose money they are going to use to set up the office, whose money, because going around gathering evidence, I'm aware that they've been calling some journalists. Somebody says that, he's going to be Attorney General, he's calling journalists for information and all that, blah, blah, blah. No problem. But we will need to know the committee that he heads, how would that committee be funded? Is it from the state resources, or is an individual who's going to fund it? If it's an individual, then the issue of corruption that they are going to deal with must also be interrogated. How is that individual going to fund their activities? What is this motivation? Is it a citizen who thinks that, okay, I just want to give you money to do this work? On what basis? Why? So we would also interrogate the issues, but it's early days yet.
But quickly, you talk about removal of what was termed as nuisance taxes. Those taxes, e-levy, betting tax, were also taxes that your presidential candidate said he was going to scrap. In fact, as far back as January this year, I think February, when he did his policy statement at the UPSA auditorium, Dr. Bawumia talked about scrapping these taxes that Mahama talks about.
Oh, I don't want you to get me wrong. I made an absolute statement to the effect that this is what Mr. Mahama said, and also promised a social intervention program. For me, I am only asking how he can successfully implement these two things. Forget about what Dr. Bawumia said. I'm not criticizing him. If I were criticizing,
yeah, but since he's talking about the same thing, would you, for instance, did you critique it at the time? No. I mean, I'm sure you may have been part of these processes. Have you always had concerns with some of these things?
You see, NDC criticized our tax regime. And my point is that when you criticize a tax regime, you are, in other words, suggesting that you will not have any social intervention policy to implement. And I'm saying that so far, the social intervention programs that they've promised to roll out will come at a cost. My question is that how would they fund it?
You also promised social intervention program. That's why I ask you.
We have a track record.
That's why I ask you, have you always had these concerns? And have you, for instance, any of your party's meetings raised them, for instance, and said, these things we're promising cannot be done because of the other promises we've made?
No, you see, we have a track record of keeping our promise. Let's put it out. One, what is NDC's track record on social intervention programs? When we were in opposition, we promised free SHS. We came into office, we implemented it. We promised 1D, 1F as an incentive for the private sector. We came into office, we implemented it. We promised a support program, the livelihood support program, that we're going to expand it. We did. The school feeding, we promised that the school feeding program will be rolled out in all schools because they were in limited number of schools. We promised. Do the fact check. We did. If we have a track record of implementing social intervention programs, and again we make further promise that these are the other programs that we are going to roll out. In the Dr. Bawumia campaign, what he said was that coming into office, he would roll out a digitalized platform, train our youth, and give them access to technology so that through technology, they will be able to create opportunities for themselves. Through technology, businesses would take advantage and expand. The world is being moved by technology now.
Okay.
And that's, he believes that with that technological drive being rolled out, the state would gain from that, and therefore there will be no need to have the betting tax, the e-levy, and all that. The NDC has not told us the alternative. If you say that you are going to take away the betting tax yourself, you are going to take away the e-levy, tell us what other sources you are going to rely on to generate revenue.
You also talk about the 1 million, digital training that you talk about. In fact, they started talking about it in 2020. They've talked about the CODES, so they've talked about the National Entrepreneurship Apprenticeship Program. But stay with us. When we come back, we need to talk also about your own assessment as a majority leader and the comment about redundant MPs. I'll ask a few questions about that. Is it not are the functions of a member of parliament not to go and enact laws? Why must an MP who is not a minister become redundant? Our guest this morning, Alexander Afenyo-Markin, majority leader and member of parliament for Ifutu. We'll be right back.
Do you want to study? I present to you.
But practically, if you're a member of parliament, you have some other responsibilities. And those responsibilities are rather the ones that determine whether or not you're going to get back to the house. Unfortunately, the law making responsibility will not be factored by your constituents. There are bread and butter issues, and let's not deny that. But like I initially indicated, we brought all these onto ourselves because of how we approach our campaign. A member of parliament will go into a constituency, meet communities and say, oh, I would pay your fees. When you vote for me, I will do this, I will do that. So once you create that expectation and you come into office, you would have to now be chasing for jobs for people. You will have CVs being brought to you to look for jobs. School fees will come, funeral donations, all manner of requests. And apart from that, demand for projects. They will come to you and say the road must be constructed, electrification, and all. So the MC or the DC, who has that primary responsibility to liaise with government to get those things done, would not even be considered because they've not elected a DC. And the way the NDC has won overwhelmingly in Parliament, and how I can foresee, I'm not praying for a doomsday for them, but I'm telling them the reality. And they know. The way the expectation is, they've charged the people. They went around telling the people that MPP has not done anything for you. Some of the constituencies that we lost, they told them, oh, like a place like Okankwe South, my respected colleague Dakwa Newman. Dakwa was helpless in the dying days of the campaign because she goes to even traditional NDC, MPP areas in the constituency, and she is told that 28 years, Yatuamamo, then yenya. The people were no more looking at the infrastructure. The people were not looking at the all-important free SHS policy that all parents were benefiting. But they were looking at the bread and butter. All because the NDC had created a certain impression that, look, they're supposed to do more. You are hungry. They are corrupt, etc., etc.
Would you agree the NDC ran a better campaign?
No, I won't say so. Why wouldn't you say so? Because if you run a campaign of mischief and propaganda to win, it's not a better campaign. It will benefit you today, but tomorrow it will catch up with you. And that's the point I'm arriving at. So, with time, let's give ourselves 6 months, 1 year. These MPs I call the redundant MPs will not be able to go back to their people. And that's where their problems will start. Besides, by a constitutional custom, President Mahama has a term. He can't go beyond 4 years. Already in Parliament on Monday, we saw some few things. In Parliament, we see things with our eyes.
What did you see?
We hear things. Their internal struggle has started.
Internal struggle for what?
For leadership. Succession. They've already started their campaign.
As to who becomes
Yes, who succeeds Mahama. Yes. I won't mention names. Time will tell. But I'm telling you that all these would be factored into what happens in 2028. So I am very optimistic that Ghanaians will soon see the hypocrisy, the double standard, the mischief, all the things that they are trying to do now with time, would know who they really are. And I'm not worried at all. All I tell my people is that let's be calm, let's take it easy. Of course, there were areas that there were some irregularities. We are doing auditing of these areas. At the right time, the party would come out with its report. Also, the violence nature with which they snatched some of our seats. They took advantage of Dr. Baumia's concession speech and went all out to unleash violence, which was very unprecedented. I know in elections there are pockets of violence here and there, but this one was very deliberate, well organized. To some extent, MPs, my colleague MPs I respect, were leading the violence, which I found very unfortunate. But they have temporarily succeeded.
Specifically, which areas?
Tema Central. Watch the videos, my brother.
And you say an MP led
Of
violence.
course. Watch it. I don't want to mention the name. Watch the video. If you don't have it,
But that
I will
means
send
you've
you.
indicted all your colleagues.
I'm making a point. Okankwe Central. It was an MP who was leading the charge, holding the return officer to declare. He had completed his process in his constituency and went there to do that. Ablekumanov. The videos are there. Your correspondents were there. Ask them. If you don't have the video, I'll share with you. At our press conference, we shared with them. It's a fact. Let's not be in denial. I am saying.
Is the conduct criminal?
I'm not going to determine the criminality.
He held a returning officer.
I'm not
compelled him to make a declaration.
I'm saying that I'm not to determine the criminality or otherwise.
But do you
I am
suspect?
situating my argument on violence.
Yeah, because I've not seen you report him or anybody to the police.
I am saying that I'm situating my argument on violence. Mm-hmm. It's not for me to determine the criminality or otherwise. Already the EC officials who were affected by these conducts have lodged official complaint to their head office.
Not the police.
I'm saying, discussing what I know.
Okay.
The EC has officially issued a statement putting out these facts. The fact that their officers were attacked, the fact that their officers were compelled, cajoled to make declarations, and they have made pronouncements on these to the effect that they are illegal. To the extent that they have given us 9 constituencies where they are going to recollect. And we all know what happened when the recollation was structured, that Ashanti, Bono, Thursday last week, Greater Accra, Friday. Eastern region was supposed to be Thursday. Ashanti and Bono was supposed to be Friday, and Greater Accra Saturday. And all political parties agreed, I repeat, agreed to this arrangement to be undertaken at the police training school at Tesano.
And well, that is the discussion with Alexander Afenyo-Markin, Majority Leader and Legislator for Efutu. It's been pretty interesting. But we come back.